On the morning of June 18, 1982, a postman crossing Blackfriars Bridge in London looks over the railing and sees a body. The man is hanging from scaffolding beneath the bridge, suit soaked through, orange rope around his neck tied in a lover's knot. His pockets are full of bricks, 11 pounds of them stuffed into his jacket and trousers. Beside the bricks, 15,000 pounds in mixed currencies, a falsified passport in a name that isn't his, and two watches. Nobody wears two watches. The briefcase he carried everywhere, the one his family says contained documents that could have destroyed careers, institutions, governments, is gone. It is never found. The dead man is Roberto Calvi, chairman of Banco Ambrosiano, private banker to the Vatican, member of a secret illegal Masonic lodge, the man who sat at the center of one of the most dangerous Venn diagrams in post-war European history, the point where the Catholic Church, the Sicilian Mafia, and the Italian deep state all overlapped. The police rule it suicide. They are wrong. Roberto Calvi did not start out dangerous. He started out gifted. Born in Milan in 1920, he was a brilliant mathematician who joined Banco Ambrosiano, one of Italy's oldest and most respected private banks, as a young man and worked his way to the top through a combination of genuine financial talent and a specific skill that would define and ultimately destroy his career: the ability to make extremely powerful people trust him with things they shouldn't trust anyone with. By the 1970s, Calvi had built a relationship with the Vatican Bank, formerly the Institute for the Works of Religion, that went far beyond a normal banking partnership. The Vatican Bank, under the control of American Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, needed someone on the outside who could move money, structure deals, and operate in the international financial system in ways that a church institution couldn't do openly. Calvi was that person. The press gave him a nickname that was half admiring and half warning: God's banker. What God's banker was actually doing was considerably more complicated than managing the Vatican's investments. Through a network of shell companies registered in Panama, Luxembourg, and the Bahamas, Calvi was moving money for clients whose identities were never meant to appear in any ledger. The Sicilian Mafia, specifically the Cosa Nostra, was using Banco Ambrosiano to launder drug money. The Vatican Bank held shares in the shell companies and received returns on money it officially had no knowledge of. And P2? Propaganda due, an illegal Masonic lodge whose membership list, when it was uncovered by Italian authorities in 1981, included 2 cabinet ministers, 48 members of parliament, and the heads of all 3 Italian intelligence agencies, was using the same infrastructure for its own political financing. P2's members referred to themselves as Frati Neri, Blackfriars. Blackfriars. The name of the bridge where Calvi's body was found is not a coincidence that investigators failed to notice. Calvi was not a passive instrument in this system. He was its architect. He built the shell company network. He managed the relationships. He sat in the room with people who could not afford to be seen together and made sure the money moved the way it needed to move. He knew where everybody was buried, metaphorically and possibly literally. The problem with knowing where everybody is buried is that it makes you a liability to everyone who put one there. In 1981, Italian investigators raided the home of Licio Gelli, P2's grandmaster, and found the membership list. The list named Calvi. The exposure triggered a collapse that Calvi spent the next year desperately trying to contain. He was arrested, charged with currency violations, convicted, fined, and given a suspended sentence. He was allowed to continue running the bank while appealing. He used the time to write a letter to Pope John Paul II, warning the Vatican that if he went down, he would not go down alone, that the Vatican Bank's involvement in what Banco Ambrosiano had been doing was documented, and that the documentation existed. The letter was sent on June 5th, 1982. 5 days later, Calvi's secretary, a woman named Graciela Corrocher, jumped from a fourth-floor window of the Banco Ambrosiano building in Milan. She left a note cursing Calvi for what he had done to the bank. Whether she jumped or was helped is a question that was never fully answered. On the same day, Calvi fled Italy on a false passport under the name Giovanni Rossi. He told his wife before he left that his life was in danger. He traveled through Austria and eventually reached London, where he checked into a rented apartment. He called his daughter from London and told her, "I don't trust the people I'm with." 8 days later, he was hanging from a bridge with rocks in his pockets. The first inquest ruled suicide. The Calvi family refused to accept it. Calvi was a devout Catholic. His family argued correctly that a man of his faith would not take his own life, and more practically, that the physics of the suicide theory didn't hold. Blackfriars Bridge had no easy access point from which a man in his 60s in the dark could have climbed down to the scaffolding and hanged himself without leaving any forensic evidence of the climb. The bricks in his pockets. Who fills their own pockets with bricks before a suicide? The two watches, the cash, the missing briefcase. The family hired George Carman QC, one of England's most formidable barristers. A second inquest was held in 1983. It returned an open verdict. The court was unable to determine cause of death. In 1992, the family hired Kroll Associates, the international investigation firm, to conduct a forensic reinvestigation. The forensic evidence pointed strongly toward murder. Calvi had been killed elsewhere and his body staged beneath the bridge. In 2003, Italian prosecutors formally charged 5 people with his murder: mafia boss Giuseppe Calò, P2 connected businessman Ernesto Diotalevi, Flavio Carboni, a Sardinian businessman who had been one of the last people to see Calvi alive, Carboni's ex-girlfriend, and Silvano Vitor, Calvi's own bodyguard. In 2007, after a trial that lasted years, all 5 were acquitted. Insufficient evidence. The judge read the verdict in an empty courtroom. None of the defendants had bothered to show up. Roberto Calvi's murder remains officially unsolved. Nobody has ever been convicted. Nobody has ever been imprisoned for it. Nobody ever will be. Here is what the money trail actually looked like. When Banco Ambrosiano collapsed in June 1982, the same week Calvi fled Italy, it left a hole of approximately $1.3 billion in debt. The money had moved through the shell company network into accounts that, on paper, were owed by entities that didn't really exist. Ghost companies. Ghosts don't repay debts. The creditors, Italian banks, international institutions, ordinary depositors, were left with the whole. The Vatican Bank, which held shares in the shell companies and had signed letters of patronage for them, letters that effectively vouched for the company's legitimacy to international creditors, denied responsibility. The Vatican claimed the letters were administrative errors, not guarantees. The argument was legally technical and morally extraordinary. In 1984, the Vatican agreed to pay $250 million to creditors, not as an admission of liability, the Vatican was careful to say, but as a gesture of goodwill, a $250 million gesture of goodwill from an institution that claimed it had no idea what the money had been used for. Licio Gelli, the P2 Grand Master who investigators believe ordered the killing, was eventually jailed for his role in the Banco Ambrosiano fraud. Not for the murder, for the fraud. He died in 2015 at the age of 96, having outlived most of the people connected to the case. Archbishop Marcinkus, the Vatican Bank official at the center of the financial relationship with Calvi, was protected by Vatican diplomatic immunity when Italian authorities tried to question him. He eventually returned to the United States, retired to Arizona, and died in 2006. He was never charged with anything. What the Calvi case actually is, stripped of the mafia and the Masons and the Vatican and the orange rope, is a story about what happens when financial institutions become instruments for people who cannot use normal channels. The Vatican needed money management it couldn't do transparently. The mafia needed laundering infrastructure. P2 needed political financing that couldn't be traced. Calvi built the system that served all three simultaneously, and the system worked until it didn't. And when it stopped working, the three entities that had needed it discovered that the man who built it knew everything, and that everything he knew was existential. He wrote a letter to the Pope. He fled on a false passport. He called his daughter and told her he didn't trust the people around him. He was right not to trust them. The briefcase was never found. The documents, if they existed, are gone. The 5 defendants walked out of court acquitted. The Vatican paid $250 million in goodwill. The Grand Master of the Blackfriars died in a Tuscan villa at 96. And on a bridge in London, 43 years later, there is still no answer. Only the orange rope and the bricks and the 2 watches on the wrists of a man who knew too much about too many people who were too powerful to be touched.